Hi, AJ Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, fan of various aspects of Japanese music and culture. And today I'm talking about a song by a Korean band called Balming Tiger, who I was not really familiar with until they just did this collaboration with Atarashii Gakko, which actually came out a month ago. And I've been sort of sitting on it, trying to decide whether I had anything useful or interesting to say. But again, as with previous Atarashii Gakko collaborations, the song has really grown on me, and I really felt like I wanted to say something about it. So let's get into it. So actually, before we even start the lyric, I love the setup of the song. The refrain with that sort of slightly cheesy flute or recorder sound, and the setup of what looks like a high school band conductor thing. Obviously, the school environment is important to Atarashii Gakko, not as a literal school. They've transcended that, I think, already, but as a marker of youthfulness and the various things that they associate with that. And I think Balming Tiger are coming from a similar tradition. And a lot of what I have to say now, I think, is going to be premised on that, on the similarity of two bands who are both sort of outside the mainstream and doing their own thing. Bands who I would describe as much as art projects as they are commercial musicians, finding a kind of common ground. And this common ground, I think, is sort of literally present throughout the song. One of the things that we're going to see a lot of in the course of the song is shared musical heritages, shared folkloric elements, shared architectural elements, which underscore a connection between Japan and South Korea. They're talking about the end of another day, the pressures that they're under, and the likelihood of failure, and the sense of being sort of menaced by things around them. So this is a very Atarashii Gakko type theme. Obviously, I'm coming to this as a fan of Atarashii Gakko rather than a fan of Balming Tiger, though I'm fast becoming a fan of Balming Tiger. And they make explicit that sense of connection between Seoul and Narita, in other words, South Korea and Japan, Narita being the airport, one of the airports near Tokyo, of course, and this idea of sticking together. Now, of course, a song like this doesn't come out of nowhere in terms of the cultural history of these two countries, which have been vexed, to say the least. And finding common ground between Korea and Japan, I think, is part of the function of the song. There's been a lot of talk recently about Japanese bands doing collaborations which feel a little arbitrary sometimes, at least I have said so. And it's not entirely clear why that collaboration is happening, and what the purpose is. I think the exact opposite is the case here. The point of the collaboration, the song is about the collaboration, right? About the need for people of similar spirit to come together across national and cultural borders. That's the point of the song. And what we get here in this early stanzas, he's singing about the frustrations of sort of not moving forward in life as an adult and kind of not wanting to, sort of holding on to a version of childhood, which obviously is there in that melody, this very sort of simple, childlike, the high school performance that we already talked about. So, sticking together, rising up, and not living up to my age, which I think in the context of the song is not a bad thing. So, and then the Atarashii Gakko part comes in, and it's positive, it's upbeat, it's like I'm feeling on fire, I'm leading my friends. And again, an explicit reference to the tiger and the blue light. Give me a fist bump. Tiger being Balming Tiger, and the blue light being the image which is associated with them, particularly on that the new album. I think that lyrically they're referring to themselves and the other band. Let me get this repeated theme. Let's share the tatami now. And tatami has sort of cultural crossovers in both. I mean, it's the word we associate with the Japanese version, but that sort of woven grass matting shows up in Korean culture as well. Tatami is a common feature of Korean buildings, houses and such as well. And so there's this sense of these two bands from different cultures wanting to come together personally and culturally or nationally even to share the tatami, right? Come together. Gang Gang Sule apparently is a Korean folk dance traditionally performed by women, and it's a kind of a harvest festival. So, we're making these kind of cultural connections between the two. So we get the image of the two bands coming together to perform this sort of ritualized dance across cultures. I love the way that they're in sync together, but they're actually doing different things. That's kind of the point. And then they, having sort of made that connection, they now come together to figure out where they're going to go. And the refrain is over the beautiful hill and the river, and then it says following the beautiful vagabond. Not a great translation, I suspect, but again, I think this sense of going out on a journey together and following kind of each other, and they characterize themselves as beautiful vagabonds. In other words, people who are kind of outside mainstream culture, who are in some ways even outcasts from mainstream culture, but who have their own value, their own beauty, their own aesthetic power. And I think this is a great image of not just what the bands themselves are, but the values that they represent. A particular sort of a version of art and artistry, including music, of course, which is about the performance of self in spite of, in defiance of cultural norms. I love this sort of goofy self-expression that he's doing here. And he's talking about he's drifting with the wind. He's flying off. He's going over the mountains and sort of charting his own course towards the blue sky, which we've already referenced, right? Heading out over the mountains. And then we cut to the playground slide, right? This sense of the childhood thing that is there at the beginning is there throughout the song, and of course it recurs in these images here. So we get this little family image of, I don't want to finish, we're playing, I don't want to go home now, Mama, give us a little more time, and then, okay, now I'm tired, let's go home, Dad, right? Papa. So this sense of holding on to the playfulness of childhood. This man, sometimes her voice just seems to get better and better and richer and more nuanced and layered and precise. It's so good, Suzuka. And she's talking about the red sky coming. There's a lot of Japanese songs about the red sky, which means the end of the day, and we're having to say goodbye, go our separate ways, but we're hoping that we will meet again tomorrow. And it's, again, it has that sort of image of children going home at the end of the day, having played together, this innocence to it. And I think that's being invoked slightly playfully, slightly ironically in this like over-dramatic enka-style performance, right? And again, I think there's connection between the Japanese enka style and Korean folk music. Folk music's not the right word, but mid-20th century folk, I guess, which has that same sort of resonance and that same sort of sound. But I also think that whenever we're talking about red skies in Japan, that sense of possibly bad things coming. It's sunset. It's also the possibility of night coming, of storms coming. And I wonder also if we're sort of transitioning a little bit into a slightly more metaphorical use of the end of the day, which we see where it becomes an image of death. Bear with me. So again, let's share this tatami together, and it's such a positive feeling. We're following the beautiful vagabond, which is our sense, ourselves, our impulse to be free and creative. But the imagery is quite sinister, and even though it's playful, I'm getting a lot of death here, right? We get the sort of the folk monsters coming together. We also get these figures who seem to be dressed in something almost like burial clothes, right? And with the hairstyles. And increasingly the choreography starts to suggest that kind of slightly odd, playful, eerie representation of ghosts in a number of different Asian cultures, with the hands up and the sort of tendency to sort of bounce, in this sort of creepy way, like the way that certain kinds of vampire and such are represented in Asian cultures. I don't want to overplay this because I think obviously the song remains playful and it's a song about life. But I think that when we're reflecting on children parting from each other at the end of the day, there's also this sense of, death comes to everybody, and that's an impulse to live, right? To revel in being alive, being creative, being playful, and being yourself, as opposed to being crushed by the sort of workaday pressures of jobs and expectations from other people, and from a kind of less individualistic and more pressurized society whose norms tend to flatten out the individual. All these ghosty images come together. Incidentally, the sound is really reminiscent of something like Ghost Town by the Specials. I don't think that's being deliberately echoed here, but this sort of high-pitched, and the laughter and such has a sort of spectral kind of association to it. And I think we see it particularly at the end here in some of these visuals, both the dancing and the figures in black and white talking. There where he's saying the wind scatters blooming petal, another great image of mortality, of mutability, of change, of the natural progression of things through time, the petals get blown away, right? The wind scatters the blooming petals. The word that the red petal wants to whisper is, let's share this tatami, eureka. And the way that I'm reading that is that what the scattered petals are saying, we wish we could stay together. Eureka being the flash of insight, of epiphany, of discovery. And what we're discovering is the need to connect, the need to be together before it's too late, before we are all scattered by the world and mortality, because that's the nature of life. So of course now we come back to the conductor, who's now skeletal, because what we started off as something about childhood is now turned into something more clearly about mortality. Wow. Slightly creepy, I will say, but in a good way. This is reminiscent of things that Atarashii Gakko have done before in terms of using spooky stories to touch on issues of life, right? I think they did something similar with Hanako, and I think the same thing is going on here. That in the end, the message is, I love the little peace sign at the end, which is, of course, finally what it's about, coming together, because in the face of the movement of time and our own mortality, nothing is worth the fighting and the disconnection and so on. So I think it's ultimately kind of a beautiful, positive energy to the song, which is simultaneously childlike and also quite sort of wise. That's all I'm going to say. All right. As ever, please like, comment, subscribe, check out my books, check out my Patreon page. I'll put a link to my Patreon page in the description. Patrons get to see these videos first, and their support helps keep this channel going. I have a little Atarashii store. You can check that out as well. And that's it. Lots of news coming in the next few weeks. But for now, I will say cheers. Bye for now. Thanks. Bye.